What we're going to do, our goal for today is just to talk a little bit about SHALVA, talk about domestic abuse, talk about what it looks like for family law attorneys that might be representing our clients, and kind of put everybody on the same page. And I'm Vicki Rifkin. If you've never met me, I'm the Outreach and Education Legal Liaison for SHALVA. I am responsible for the CLE programs that we produce, and I do a lot of general communication for the agency. Allison is our new in-house legal liaison. Some of you may have worked with Rosemary in the past, but she is going to be taking on the role of working directly with our clients to help explain the legal process and what things look like for them. She is not going to typically be representing them in court except on limited matters. That's where you all come in. But Allison is a nice bridge between the client and the attorney, not even a bridge, working like in tandem with the attorneys and also with the therapist as well. She'll have access to therapists, whereas you typically wouldn't. So Allison, you want to introduce yourself for a second and say a couple words?
Hi, I'm Allison Annixter. I have been doing domestic relations work for about 10 years, mostly in Cook County. I recognize most of you here, so hello again. I've only been at SHALVA for 2 months, but I have to say it's really been so eye-opening and really just an amazing experience. And I feel truly honored that I get to help these women who truly need to be assisted both legally and emotionally. So I am very excited to work with all of you in the future and see where we can go, and with helping all of these really amazing women.
Allison, you wanted to also maybe mention something about how this work is different from your previous work, like at the DV clinic?
Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of you have kind of volunteered at the Domestic Violence Legal Clinic. It's an amazing organization. How it generally works is that you meet with a client, they come in that morning, you meet with them for about an hour, you determine whether their case is kind of meets the criteria of domestic violence and whether we can represent them. We draft up paperwork, and 2 hours later we are standing in a courtroom with essentially a stranger next to us representing them, trying to get an order of protection. The same goes for even a regular domestic relations case. They come in, have an hour consult with you, go through every detail that is relevant, and then you start representing them. What makes SHALVA unique is that these clients are working with us for months, sometimes even years before they enter a courtroom. We get to know them on an intimate level, both through my work as a legal liaison and through their therapeutic work with the therapists that we have on staff. Because I communicate with the therapist, I have a much deeper understanding of what they are going through and what their needs are, which helps me help them more in court. So if they are acting in a way that we think maybe seems contrary, they're not returning calls, they're being evasive, we know that's not because they're indifferent, it's because they're going through a lot of trauma or abuse, or just doing what they need to do to manage. So it really allows us to understand intimately what these women are going through and to be able to tailor our assistance for each of their respective cases. So it just gives us such a deeper breadth of understanding that I think really enables us to give us the support that they need.
Perfect. Thanks. And that is why we're doing this presentation today, so that each of you will also have hopefully a deeper understanding. And we're always, I want you to know, we're always available. Both Allison and myself, as well as our therapists, if you have questions, general questions, even regarding a client that may not currently be a SHALVA client, but you think might need our services. Hopefully after today, you'll better understand what those services are and what we do, and that we can have a ripple effect throughout the community. So I'm going to share my screen. And how did this happen? Right, here we go. This is a document that I'm going to be sharing with you guys later, but Let me get back to the first page here. Everyone can see my screen, I hope.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I'm not going to make it super big because then I have trouble navigating. So I'm just going to go this way. In case I need to get back. So today we're going to, just like we said, go kind of through a roadmap. So I want you to understand what SHALVA is a little bit better. So we'll talk quickly about the history, promise one slide, talk about our services. That's a couple of slides. And then the rest of the time we'll be talking about domestic abuse and how it relates to the work that you do as family law attorneys. So first, it's important to know what our mission is. And our mission is that we support Jewish women experiencing and healing from domestic abuse through counseling, supportive services, and community education. We are the oldest independent Jewish domestic abuse agency in the United States. We were founded in 1985. What sets us apart is that we provide culturally sensitive, trauma-informed counseling and supportive services. So we have many years of experience. We have 4 therapists on staff right now, 4 people on our community education crew, and a couple of people in development and admin. So I'm sure have all heard these statistics before, that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men experience domestic abuse at some point in their lives. And it does not discriminate. It affects all classes, economic, race, religion, age. It is everywhere. And all of us know someone who has experienced it at some point. Our services. So we've kind of what we do for the whole community down to what we do for individuals. So we provide a lot of community education work. We have our online resources. If you've never looked at the shalvacares.org website, please do so. We also have a healthy relationship program called 7 Circles that's geared towards committed couples it's just starting out in their relationships, but there's a commitment involved on how to have a healthier relationship from the beginning. That is called 7 Circles, and the website is 7circlesjourney.org. I encourage you to look that up. We have a 24/7 hotline, which I'm now seeing on this is broken apart, but it's 773-583-4673. Then we provide counseling services. We also provide support to friends and family, and we have an Orthodox Rabbinic Task Force, which is a group of Orthodox rabbis that survivors can work with to have religious questions answered related to the abuse and coping and access to community support. And it's really important to know that all of our services are free. So for as far as our counseling goes, we see anyone who is 18 and over. You do not have to be married to come to SHALVA. It can be a current or past relationship where you have experienced some kind of domestic abuse or intimate partner violence. Anyone who self-identifies as female at this point is who we're seeing, and anyone who self-identifies as Jewish. We do, one of the good things about COVID was that it made us switch the way we do our work. So in addition to our in-person counseling services, we now have phone and virtual available. We provide culturally sensitive, trauma-informed care for as long as it's needed. And we do have legal, as you'll learn more about today, as well as financial assistance. So we have this slide up because all relationships fall on a spectrum, and that spectrum can change. We can see healthy relationships, we can see unhealthy relationships, and we can see abusive relationships. And each relationship may have a little bit, some parts of it may be unhealthy, some parts of it may be healthy. When we start to move over towards abusive, even an abusive relationship, you'll see that there are cycles. So there will be good days and there will be really bad days. So as an example, you can have someone who is in a have a healthy economic partnership in their relationship, where they're both making decisions together about finances. It can be an unhealthy relationship where you're disagreeing over money all the time, or it can be an abusive relationship where one person is controlling all of the money and making all the money decisions. Before I go further, I wanted to also make up 2 points. As we're talking about abuse, this can be triggering for some people, and I always like to put the warning out front that if you're feeling uncomfortable, please, step away, take a break. I'm recording this. You can come back and listen to it later. Also, pronouns, the people that we see in the office, as I mentioned, are female identifying. We try and use gender neutral pronouns in our presentations, but the fact is that we do see women here, and we will typically refer to she and her, but it's not diminishing the fact that men experience abuse too. So the clinical definition that we work on with domestic abuse is that domestic abuse is a systemic pattern of power and control for the sole purpose of manipulating an intimate partner. Obviously, domestic abuse is never justified. That's a formal definition, but seeing abuse is an ongoing challenge. There's no real checklist out there. I'm going to go through the different types of abuse, but you're almost relying on I know it when I see it, just like obscenity. But it's not, it can only be understood in looking at all the historical factors that go into any particular relationship. What I really want to stress here is that if we as lawyers and also judges are fluent in recognizing abusive behavior, it starts to become a little more obvious in the future. So the more you see it, the more you know about it, the easier it is to recognize it. We have a board member who was a former pediatrician, and she said she never had a single abusive parent that came into her office until she joined the SHALVA board, meaning that she didn't know that was what was happening until she started learning more about domestic abuse. So the different types of physical abuse, no big surprises here. Physical abuse happens, and it does not happen in all of the cases. Often it's just simply the threat of physical abuse is enough to control someone's behavior. So here are examples, the choking, pulling hair, confinement, blocking a doorway, withholding medication or food, preventing someone from receiving medical care, punching a wall. Again, it's that threat. You're not actually physically harmed, but it's enough to scare you. Throwing objects is another good way to do that. And also in this, control over someone's weight and what they're eating is another form of physical abuse that we see. Emotional abuse, I always like to say that all abuse is emotional abuse. It is all going to affect you psychologically. It's going to cause stress in your life. Things that people have been talking about, gaslighting seems to be a very popular topic these days. Isolating someone, controlling them, humiliating, withholding affection, the bullying, the blaming, using children as a weapon, even threatening suicide. That really is examples of emotional abuse. Tech abuse, that is where we're using our phone. An abuser would be using phones or tools, other tools, social media, internet, to control someone. So constantly texting, monitoring emails and cell phones, requiring the sharing of passwords, tracking whereabouts, those great little tiles. Now, I'm sure we've all heard news stories at this point about someone who doesn't know how their partner knows everywhere that they are, and they find a tracking device in a car or a bag. Also keeping someone from having access to technology is a form of abuse. Financial abuse, this is you'll see in a later slide, this is a huge barrier for those who wish to leave an abusive relationship. It is, over 90% of survivors say this is the reason they cannot leave, is because of the financial abuse, because they don't have money, they can't afford to leave, being put on a strict allowance, also keeping both removing names from financial documents so they don't have access to money, as well as putting names on accounts that a survivor might be unaware of so that their credit is destroyed. Those can all be forms of financial abuse. Spiritual abuse would be using religion in a way to manipulate someone. So whether it's belittling your spiritual beliefs, undermining the way that you practice, requiring a certain form of practice, distorting religious texts to control a person. And the other thing that's on here, and it's not just Jewish, there are religious divorces in other faiths as well, but refusing to give a get is definitely a form of abuse. I am going to put into the chat, I'm not going to do it right this second, but I will put in the chat a link to our program that we did recently with Rabbi Yonah Reese, who is the head of the Beit Din here in Chicago, which is like the board of rabbis. That's like a judicial, it's the Jewish court. And it's all about the get process, and refusal to give a get keeps a woman chained or to her former husband. So even if they've been divorced in civil court, she still cannot be remarried until she gets the Jewish divorce as well. She would be considered an agunot, and it actually, International Agunot Day is coming up on Monday. So a little bit of extra information there. Sexual abuse does occur in marriages, and that would be, forcing sexual activities, flaunting extramarital affairs, withholding affection or sex, also reproductive coercion, either forcing someone to carry a child that they don't want to, or failure to use birth control. So domestic abuse, no big surprise to anyone here, definitely affects kids. So when they are, hang on a second. So witnessing abuse can have devastating effects on the children. They don't need to actually see it. They can hear it. Just to even be with people that have experienced it can be traumatic for them. It affects their emotional well-being. It affects their grades. It affects their future romantic relationships, as well as their cognitive development. We've had another speaker come on a few times that's talked about this. His name is Lundy Bancroft. I highly recommend, if you've never read any of his books, to read them. I meant to grab the one, but the one that I'm thinking of is called "Why Does He Do That?" But he has a whole list of books about abuse that I strongly recommend. So I want to kind of move into the barriers to leaving. So, here's this horrible relationship. Why would anyone stay in it? It's important to know that the abuse does not happen all of the time. There are good moments in a relationship, even if it's an abusive relationship, and that's why they're staying. As someone who's in an abusive relationship may also be staying because of their children, because of their finances. Like I mentioned, it doesn't happen all the time. They might be embarrassed to admit that they're in this kind of relationship. They're feeling a lot of shame and self-blame for it. Being in the relationship has caused them to have a low self-esteem. They really believe that they're the only ones that's ever experienced this. We have actually, one of the good things about working at SHALVA is that you hear from our therapists themselves, and they talk about how having group therapy really helps, because other people, then that it's not just you that's experienced it. A lot of our clients come in thinking they're the only one who's ever gone through this. Other reasons for not leaving: the fear of being alone, to not have, you've had a partner for however many years and suddenly you're out there on your own, and fear for their safety. Leaving a relationship is the most dangerous time. It's more likely that there's going to be physical harm after someone has left an abusive relationship. A little bit about those who abuse. Instead of calling them abusers, we now use this term because it's their behavior. It's not who they are. I mean, it is who they are, but it's their behavior. It's important to know that it spans all demographic groups, just like anyone can be, anyone can be a survivor of domestic abuse. It is usually a learned behavior. They've seen it in their own childhood. They are often charming. You'll see this if you're working, as you're working on cases, you'll see that they're charming, but they do reserve their abusive behavior for their partner. They will often deny that this behavior happens. And it's very important to know that alcohol, drugs, and mental illness do not cause abuse. They save their behavior for their partner. They're not getting into fights at the bar. They're not having problems at work. They're saving all of the abusive behavior for home. So I mentioned a couple of slides before about the barriers to leaving. These also become the same legal issues that survivors face. So looking at orders of protection and divorce and child custody, we've kind of already touched on, or we're going to touch on some more as well. But other legal issues that we need to consider and keep in mind that happen for survivors are housing issues, credit issues, tax, gun control, and employment. All of these can be affected by the domestic abuse they've experienced. We can call this how perpetrators abuse the court system, or simply how perpetrators use the court system. It's not really about the abuse of the legal system. The concern is really with the ways that a person with a history of abuse uses the mechanisms within the legal system. So they use specific aspects of the legal system that are actually central to their functioning. So you need to be able to file motions, but they file excessive motions. They fail to comply with their motions. They'll miss visitation, late or non-payment of support. So everything that they do, they're going to go back into court again. So it never ends.
I do want to add something here, Vicki, too, that I've kind of noticed, and I thought of it after we spoke.
Go ahead.
I think what happens is that someone, we have a case where a wife or mother files an order of protection or files a pleading seeking parenting time. And in that pleading, she alleges the concerns of abuse about husband.
Mm-hmm.
What we're finding that the husband also does sometimes is that they'll file kind of a counter position.
Yes.
And what this does is it confuses a court. It makes it seem like this is a dysfunctional relationship that they had. And that's not necessarily the case. It's, all of a sudden a judge is sitting there saying, well, mom and dad can't get along and, they're the problems, when really it's just one party.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that tends to be very successful for the people who are doing it. It angers the judges. Sometimes they get frustrated. They just see these, as two people who can't get along and they can't, prioritize their children, when that's not the case at all. And I think that has been a very successful method for these abusers to do.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Thank you. That's great. Here's another view of it. What kind of part of what Allison was mentioning. So there's a power and control wheel that's used within the domestic violence community that really lays out the different ways, the different forms of abuse in the shape of a wheel. And it's called the Duluth model. And the Duluth model also came up with this post-separation abuse wheel that talks about the different forms abuse can take after they're no longer, the parties are no longer in a relationship together if they've been married. So you can see what these things are here. Things like disrupting the relationship with the children, undermining their ability to parent, totally ignoring the children or endangering the children, withholding financial support, discrediting a parent. I did want to mention, I'm glad you mentioned the first one, Allison, about responding with a counterclaim. So like, it's not just with the order protection, which would confuse, but also responding to a claim with a counterclaim, like filing for, like, so I'll use here go the pronouns. So she files for child support, and he might counterclaim for more parenting time so that he doesn't have to spend as much in child support, even though he's not been a very active father in the past. The cross application for restraining orders you mentioned. Another thing that happens a lot is claiming parental alienation, and the term parental alienation meaning not what we typically think of, but what has been used in the past, where the claim of abuse itself is turned by the abuser into saying that the claim is being made only for the purpose of alienating the other parent. When we know that most claims of abuse are valid and should be believed. So not trying to turn it on its head into something more sinister than what it is. We talked a little bit already about filing frivolous or repeated motions. They can also happen with discovery requests and continuances. Failure to meet court deadlines, making false allegations that are just a waste of time because a motion's been filed and it has to be rebutted. The other thing that we see from time to time is actions against third parties, such as maybe making claiming attorney misconduct or even defamation. So all more ways in which the legal system can be used to control. So the question then comes, can the cycle ever be broken? Like, when does it ever end? Sometimes the divorce that never ends even after it's final, because it just continue to go back into court. So one thing that's really important to know is that abuse doesn't often stop unless there's real intervention. And we're not talking about anger management programs here. Anger management programs don't address the issue. As I said earlier, if it's an abusive relationship, they're only getting angry at one person, and that person is their partner or their former partner. They're able to control their anger in any other situation. So anger management is not going to work. Change is going to really only happen if the abuser is going to accept responsibility. So even partner intervention programs, Lundy touched on this during his program that he did for us. And these paid programs are great, but there's no measurement to it. There's no, you complete the program and that's it. There's no, if you're required to go into an alcohol treatment program, you then have to show that you're no longer drinking. But you do a partner abuse program, you don't have to show that your behavior has changed at all. So where is the safety for kids I wish someone else were talking on the other end so I could know whether our heads were nodding so that I knew that you understood what I'm saying. The other thing to keep in mind is that couples counseling is never a good idea. There's no way that if it's an abusive relationship, for the two parties to be sitting in the room, one party is not going to be able to speak. And that is the partner who is the person who is the survivor. They're going to be afraid to say what's really happening because they're afraid they're going to be abused or harmed in some way because they have spoken out. So couples counseling is not going to work in an abusive relationship. So before I get to this, I just want to mention, like, so what are things the courts can do? What are the things that you as attorneys can ask for? There's certainly being able to identify that it's, whether you want to call it domestic violence, a new term that's coming out a lot is coercive control, which I would say is the same thing as emotional abuse. Judges certainly have the power to admonish the parties at the least. They can award costs. Allison and I were having conversations about declaring the abusive party, if they're representing themselves, if they're pro se, a vexatious litigant, or holding the parties in contempt of court for their behavior. There could be restraining orders put in place to prohibit certain conduct. And the other thing to keep in mind is that any of these legal responses are retroactive. So the abuse is still happening. But the sooner that it's recognized, the sooner it can stop. So more things to keep in mind. Okay. So how are we going to recognize that it's abuse? Obviously we've talked about this, but there are things you can ask questions. If SHALVA has referred the case, don't question. It is an abuse case. They have experienced some kind of domestic abuse in their lives. That's why we're sending them to you as a referral. So that's most important. This right here is the biggest question. When did the behavior start? So I'm sure you've all seen high conflict cases where they're fighting over everything, but that's not the same as an abusive relationship. If it's an abusive relationship, this behavior has been happening since day one. There has been signs of control in a relationship where one party has all the control and the other does not from the start. It's not something that just happened when somebody asked for a divorce. That is the biggest difference. These are screening questions. I would not go through and do a checklist, it is part of your intake, but you can pepper some of these questions perhaps into your intake process that you already have. So I'm not going to read all of these to you. I'm going to send you this document, but I want you to see there are a lot of different ways to ask the question, and it should be an ongoing process. It shouldn't just be in the first time you meet with the client. You can have one or two questions in every conversation you have. Let's take a look at these. This one about access to guns and knives, there's a lethality assessment. I'll try and remember afterwards to send some information on that as well. Obviously that's very important. Having guns in the home makes it that much more likely that they're going to get used. So let's say that a client they answer one of these questions. Yes, they say, yes, I feel very unsafe. We're still living in the same house. I'm very worried that I'm going to be harmed. Or I know that after we come home from court, he's going to scream at me again. When things are disclosed, it's important to be open and non-judgmental. So helpful, these are a list of some helpful statements. The most important thing you can do is just say thank you. Thank you for trusting me with this. And I will keep this information in confidence. I will only share it if you want me to. Let them know that they're believed. These are good statements also, not just in your practice, but in your daily life. Letting them know that it's not their fault and that you're there if they want to talk some more. At the same time, there are some things that you could say that might sound victim blaming. So asking straight out, are you a victim of domestic violence? You're not going to get a straight answer anyway, so don't ask the question. And just don't ask the question. asking, why'd you get involved with them? Why haven't you left? Why haven't you called the police? Have you tried couples counseling? None of those are really going to be helpful. Even if they come from a good place, they're not, they're just going to sound to a victim like they're a victim, and they're somehow to blame for what has happened to them. Okay, since I can't see anyone, I just want to give, I'm gonna see if we have any questions, but just a couple of final thoughts that I have here is that it's really important. Our clients are not perfect. They are human. They have experienced trauma. They don't all present the same way. Some may come in seeming very angry. Some may seem very shy, meek, evasive, overly loud. None of them are perfect, but none of us are perfect. And it's really important to remember. Even if you're representing someone pro bono, yes, they're grateful, but they're still going to make mistakes. And we can't have we're here to help you navigate, especially if you're representing them pro bono. But set reasonable expectations for where they're coming from. Winning the case isn't always enough. Just because you've won a motion, or it all comes at a cost. And for our clients, it comes, it's a cost of time and money and emotional energy. And if you're already dealing with past trauma, those costs escalate. Keep in mind also that the survivors, they're having to face their abusers in court, and this can be exceptionally daunting for them. So it can also be stressful, and it will produce a power imbalance when they walk in the room. And that those who abuse, when they come into court, the court may be the only place where they see their former partner. So to keep pulling them in, it keeps the connection, and it keeps the power and control that much longer for every motion that they file. So I think with that was a lot of information. And so I think I talked for the last half hour, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to ask if there are any questions. You can hop back on with video if you want. What did this bring up for people? Did anybody, if you want to share?
Yeah, and Allison, thank you guys so much for, first of all, sharing your passion. It's always nice to hear and see people who are passionate and believe what they say. And I think we don't get to see that all the time in the courtroom. So thank you for sharing that. I actually had one question for you, just as I was thinking from all sides. I apologize, I put my lawyer hat on, but when I represent victims who then become petitioners or respondents in divorce actions, because oftentimes the OP is consolidated into the D action. And there is a big difference, obviously, between what can happen in an OP courtroom, what can happen in a D courtroom. How do you guys recommend preparing for a litigant who may have lost on an OP matter, whose EOP is denied or the plenary never comes to fruition, and still has to go through the D case, or still has to go through the family law matter? What do you, obviously in private practice, we set expectations very loftily, and sometimes they're met and sometimes they're not. But how do you deal with that? Because from the emotional end, from the victim's point of view, they've already lost. The system has already failed them when that EOP is denied or not extended.
Allison, you wanna?
I think you just have to, and I think part of the benefit is mostly that we've already been working with the clients for so long prior to them getting the OP. So we have a lot of cases where there's constant abuse, and then it just takes, the most recent kind of abusive action to bring them into court with the OP. We set reasonable expectations with them. We have to be honest. I don't like to sit there and say, no judges care, everything's horrible, no one listens to victims of abuse. But I am very realistic with them about what to expect. So with the understanding that likely, if you file, at 5:55, most likely the other side's going to try to bring the case to the Daily Center, because I think the Daily Center judges, are more likely to encourage you to drop the OP and just kind of work it out. So I think as long as they understand that that's a likelihood of happening, you can't really stop it. That the abuse is valid, that it happened, that it's a factor, that it is relevant, but we have to decide when to bring it up, and just really kind of set those expectations that way, to get them started with a financial affidavit as soon as possible, to help them prepare financially. That's really all you can do. It's hard because I think that people feel failed by the court system all the time. And it's imperfect, but it is also there to help. So it's just a matter of setting expectations, really.
Right. The one thing I would add is that not all of our clients decide that they want an OP at all. It's not always the strategy that we go with. So, and we also have cases where, like as Allison meant, maybe there is abuse. It's an abusive relationship, but how are they going to prove that to the judge? The judge wants to see a black eye. They want to see a black eye in the last 3 days. They want to know that that you feel unsafe now at this moment, that you're under, threat of abuse current, where it's been going on for 20 years. And the client has just decided last week that they're going to start getting help from SHALVA, or last month. So it's all part of a process, but just also to, I have to say that most of our clients don't have OPs.
Yeah, a lot of safety planning too.
Always.
I think
it's one of the
that's
first
been
things. Yes.
One of the first things. It's helping them understand, if they don't have enough for an OP, eventually you're going to have to, file for divorce, and what does that look like and how to prepare for that. Do you want to be out of the house when he served, all of that stuff. And again, I think it's just prepping them for the onslaught of what litigation brings.
Thank you. Great presentation.
question.
Really meaningful. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
I have a question.
Hi, Helena.
Hi, I have a current case where, it's not physical abuse, but my goodness, is my client afraid of her own shadow? And they're not Jewish. It's a DuPage case, and they're in the same house. It's like a small apartment, and my client has the financial means to move out, but they don't have a parenting agreement yet. So we're working that out, and she's basically ready to agree to anything and everything under the sun, which, probably is giving him too much because she wants to get out. She can't leave because he'll change the locks and she'll never see those kids again. And we're going to be fighting in court, to get her to have access to those kids again. And it's just such an icky catch-22, because it's like, I'm trying to tell her not to give away this. She doesn't want a GAL. Like she wants none of it because she's so afraid of her own shadow, and she thinks she's this horrible. She thinks she's the problem because she believes all of his stuff. And I just hate the situation. And so it's like, without getting an allocation done, I can't have her move out. Not that we're that far off, but ew,
I would say, and one of the nice things about the legal liaison program is that our clients are seeing a therapist.
I've gotten her into therapy.
Okay, well, that's
It's a really good one.
That's gonna help a lot. That's gonna go a long way. It's just to help her get through it at some point. And attorneys aren't therapists. you know, some of them are, but that's not the main, and everyone is a armchair therapist to a certain extent when working with these clients, but you're not a therapist, and to be able to find the support that she needs isn't always going to be found in the courtroom. She needs something else to get her through this, as you said, icky, horrible, no good phase till you can't get her out.
Right. I mean, it took me about 6 months to get her into therapy because she consulted with me, you know, forever before she ever retained and did anything. And, you know,
I'm
it's just
surprised
sad.
DuPage doesn't, I thought DuPage would just kind of automatically appoint a GAL if they don't have an agreement. I mean, not automatically, but normally, I mean, they kind of push it through.
It's a very new filing.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, it should not have, it should have been a filing a long time ago, like many of these situations, but it's a new enough filing that it's not, you know.
Mm.
All right. One of the other things too, and Allison touched on this, you know, clients could be, it often takes many times to actually leave. They may say they're leaving and then they go back, and then they say the average is 7 attempts at leaving before the relationship is actually over. So she may be I don't know her. So she may be very new in this whole process, you know, and we have to expect that clients are going to change their minds, and we can't be angry or upset with them when they do, you know, agree with the choices that they're making. But, you know, in our office, the choices that are made are the client's choices, and it may make it that much harder, but it's their choice, and we're empowering them to make their own choices along the way, even when we don't agree. Oh yeah, Jordan, you had a good point. Yeah, if the therapist doesn't understand DV, Helena, it's gonna, I mean, I assume that you
They
sent them to
do. It's a
someone
really,
who's-
like, it's a good situation, and I have authorization to speak with their therapist and like whatever. We're triaging I mean, it's just one of those situations. It's just,
Yeah.
I haven't had one yet where like my client is trapped in the house with the guy. I don't know why I haven't had it yet. I just haven't had it yet.
Yeah.
So usually the guy's left, or he's, I don't know, P, or I don't know.
Yeah. Any other questions? There are, I mean, most of you I know, but some of you, this is the first time, so I really appreciate it. We will be, you know, getting in touch with you as we need referrals, which I know we've got, Allison's met with, she's starting to meet with clients one-on-one now, and it's going to pick up again for sure.
I already have a couple probably, so
Yeah.
might be hearing from us soon.
Yes, maybe hearing from us sooner rather than later. So I just want to thank you all. If there's nothing else. All right. Oh, wait. Jordan's going to get very mad at me if I don't do this. So I'm going to share my screen again. And this is the moment of awkward silence where I ask you to take the survey. So if you could take the survey, I'll try and put this in the chat. I think I can do that. Can I?
I got it, Vicky.
Oh, thank you.
I shared it.
Thank you. Oh, and I also wanted to put the get program in there. Here he is. Okay, I'm going back to the awkward silence. And really that program in the chat is really worth watching. And if you can do that before you sign out to the survey, I'd appreciate it.
No, I actually had one more quick question. I'm so sorry as
Sure.
I'm thinking. I apologize. And Allison, this is probably putting you on the spot a little too, so I'm apologizing. Sincerely apologizing, not in the way you guys presented in your lecture whatsoever. This is my naivete because I have not worked with you, or I've obviously attended things and I've worked with the majority of people on the screens here. But when you guys, as an agency, or you, Allison, individually refer a client to a firm, do you first check with the firm for conflicts, or just the what is the procedure that you guys entail? Because obviously all of us who are in private practice have a conflicts check before we even can have somebody pick up the phone. So how do you guys do that with respect to placing within firms?
So we, again, with the empowerment model that we work with, we don't assign a referral attorney to any client. We give them a names usually of 2 to 3 attorneys, and they're then responsible for reaching out to the attorneys to make appointments to do the initial consultations. Before I give the names, I talk to the attorney, I give them a little bit of information about the case. They always ask for the name, and I always say I can't do that because I can't disclose the names of any of our clients. Everything is confidential, but they will self-identify when they reach out to you. So you would do your conflict check, when they call you. So they could be conflicted out, but we won't know that until they've already talked to you.
And again, I apologize on my naivete with
No,
right, the
no, I think it's a
empowerment,
great
you're right.
question. I should make sure I include that the next time I do this program, and that we should have, about how the process works.
And,
So thank you
but
for
when you said, when you said the empowerment, and again, the choice of words, just like you said, when you use pronouns,
Yeah.
my choice of saying, what do you do? Yet that was I was not disregarding what you said, but
Oh,
you're
no,
right.
no.
Empowering the client, empowering to set your own is very powerful. So I really appreciate that answer too. That was,
Yeah.
thanks.
Oh, good. Thank you, Jessica. Anything else? All right, guys. Well, thank you all for being here. And we will be